Welcome into TFW Live. It's the best kept secret in fantasy football where we keep that week one feeling going all year long. I'm Big Travie, and I'm joined here by my best friends Austin and Johnny Game Time Hicks. Welcome to the show, boys. Also, welcome to Whisper Nation and all of you in the chat. Classic Mike, all those boys that are in here that are going to be in here later as well. And we like to start off the show, as always, shouting out some of the newest members of Whisper Nation, those who have subscribed or followed us on social media. So we'll get into it here. Jamel Applewhite, Zach Silverman, Clarky Cards, Chandler Bryan, Brandon Hay, the Fantasy Futuristic Podcast, Jeff Carpenter, Jacob, Freddie, Adam Hungry, _ the Fantasy Squirrel, CDY Red 21, and RX Gaming. And if you love fantasy football and would enjoy being part of a community where you know you belong, hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. We're trying to get just one more sub. Just one more on this stream. Could be you. And if you're new, let us know where you're streaming from. We'll shout you out right here on the show. On today's episode, we are over the moon to be joined by a very special guest, Matt Kelley. You also know him as the Podfather. Also, maybe you think of him as the Howard Stern of fantasy football. This is the man behind PlayerProfiler.com and the world-famous Draft Kit, and he joins us today. Welcome to the show, Matt. How are you, man?
I'm really good, guys.
Yeah.
This is great. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Finally, the first guest who gets it.
Whispers.
Yeah.
I'm
Finally.
Yes, very on
Now, we've been doing
brand.
this shit for 4 years now. You're the first one. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
We were told we had to turn up our volumes because people couldn't hear us.
Richard Harris. Richard Harris is the best whisperer. Do you remember Richard Harris?
Nothing.
I do.
Let's now whisper now about what Rome could be.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
What is Rome, Maximus? What is Rome?
Oh my
Wait a
God.
second. You're telling me we're not
played
talking
Marcus
about Rome
Aurelius.
today?
No, not today.
To the wrong show.
Right.
Maximus.
Well, we appreciate
Whisper
you.
now with an old man.
That's what we're going to attempt to do here today. Not that
Whispering's
old.
hard, man. My throat's already
You're going to lose your
Whispering's
voice
really
halfway
tough.
through.
It's really
Yeah.
underrated.
Now you
It's
see
a
the
hard
real
act.
reason why we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can't do it during our mock draft marathon. That would be ridiculous. 24 hours of whispering would just.
So your show gave up the whispering?
Yeah. We had to.
Oh,
We had
wow.
to. We
I
had to keep the
understand
voice.
it.
It was
Yeah.
a medical
I get it,
situation.
man.
Yeah, it's all about keeping the voice strong for the people. So that's what we're trying to do here today. But Matt, we want to introduce you a little bit to Whisper Nation, talk a little bit of rapid fire questions here, get to know you a little bit better. So we'll start it off here with, what year did you start playing fantasy football?
2001.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you root
Space
for your...
Odyssey?
Nah, there you
It
go.
was.
good
It was an
name for it.
odyssey. I drafted Tony Gonzalez in the first round. I thought I was a genius. I was like, oh my God, bully tight end. I got a competitive advantage on the field, and it worked. It worked. I went tight end, and then I went receiver. I was like Marvin Harrison. I don't know. It was everyone was going running back, and I was getting all the top players at the other positions, and then I think I hit on a sleeper running back, and I won the league, and I was like, all right, this is it. I'm doing
That's how
this.
you do it.
I'm doing it. I'm doing
The
first year. So that happened to me in baseball too. Fantasy baseball. I picked up Rafael Furcal when he was called up for the Braves. He had like 60 steals in the second half. And that put me over the top in that fantasy base. So I started off real hot, and I think I've been chasing it ever since.
It's a pretty common theme.
The trajectory of your life in that moment.
Chased it so much, started an empire.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that leads me to
that
my
put me on the
next
trajectory.
leads me to my next question here, Matt. For you, do you root for your NFL team or your fantasy team more?
Neither.
I don't even like football.
I root for high scoring games.
Yeah, okay.
I root for high scoring games. Like there were, was it Cardinals Seahawks 2 years ago in DFS?
Oh, don't know. The one was like 3-3 and they kept missing the field goals. Is that
No,
the one?
I'm talking about
okay.
like Lockett went completely nuclear. Everyone went completely nuclear in that game.
Yeah, it was like the Murray versus Wilson. It was Sunday night, wasn't it? I think it was a Sunday night game.
night football game. I mean, these are just, or maybe it was a late afternoon game, and it went well into Sunday because it was like overtime. Those are the games, man. Like these Chargers games, late. That's where I'm glued. that's where I'm just glued to the television. That's what I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of overtime. That's what I'm a fan of.
Reminds me of that Kansas City Chiefs Los Angeles Rams game a couple of years back, Travi,
man.
when you were there here in LA. Like that regular season game was
Even
unbelievable.
that playoff game, right?
Basically,
Bills.
right?
Like
That fuels your veins.
that is amazing because I'm a Patriots fan and Brady really spoiled me in a big way. Like so you start off with the Rams situation when with like them after 9/11 coming out with the American flags,
Yeah, right.
and beating like the big time favorite team with the sexy offense, right? That was so cool. And then you had the incredible, it's not a slam dunk. I mean, I know it is, but it's like the comeback 28-3 against the Falcons was amazing. But in terms of singular moments or condensed moments, the Seahawks game, the Seahawks championship, where Javon Curse is kicking the ball up in the air. Remember this? He's on the ground and he's kicking it up in the air. He's kicking up in the air and then he catches it. And everyone knew you're doomed. Like we remember David Tyree. It's like, if that's going to happen, it's over. It's over. It's over. And I was so sure it was over. I was just as sure as it was over. I may have even been more sure that game was over at that point when Curse caught that than at any point in the Falcons game.
Wow.
And so to come back from that was it's just, I don't know. It almost ruined me. I think it ruined me as a football fan.
And that's ultimately what keeps us coming back. Matt, any favorite fantasy player all time that comes to mind?
Well, Priest Holmes was pretty amazing. But I'm
popular
gonna go back.
one.
I'm gonna go back, man. I think the player that's responsible for more championships and the guy I had on more fantasy teams was Tony Gonzalez. I was drafting him every year.
You always forget you always remember your first.
Matthew Berry came out with this strategy to draft Gronk in the first round, and I was like, "That's great." I appreciate that strategy. I had that strategy 10 years ago, just for the record.
Love it. How about a fantasy player that's burned you the most?
Oh God, I'm trying to think of it.
Got to go dark.
Trying to think of a player that I was never overweight on. That I was never drafting and always seemed to come through. That's a great question.
I'm thinking like because lately you've been so hard against Jerry Jeudy, and like if you said it the other day, like if Jerry Jeudy pops, you're in trouble.
No. What I said
was
I don't think Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy can't beat me. Jerry Jeudy can't beat me. Okay, a player like Jerry Jeudy can't beat you. So if you're at the poker table and you're trying to figure out what kind of hands are out there that can beat you, Jerry Jeudy can't beat you. Devontae Smith can't beat you. Okay, those are
Not
players
alphas.
that can't. You don't worry about it. They can't beat you. Okay, but like a Javonte Williams, even if you don't love him this year because you think he's too expensive, you still need to draft some of him. You still need to have some Javonte Williams because he's the type of guy that can, run you over. And you want to make sure that you're not too underweight across your teams and want to make sure you have some Javonte Williams. So there are some players that even though you're out on them at ADP, right? Thankfully with best ball, it's much more conducive to drafting a guy like Javonte Williams. And then so you can skew your best ball portfolio with some Williams and make sure that you're covered because he could absolutely beat you if things break his way.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's got to, I'm thinking about it more. It's anytime you have a running back, I think James Conner is the one really. Like James Conner scares me because he actually isn't a quality receiver at all. He had this one-handed catch along the sideline that everyone remembers last year, big deal. And then he had he was finished near the top of the league in receptions the year that Ben Roethlisberger set the NFL record for pass attempts. Okay, right? If he's going to get 80% snap share with a guy that's setting the record for pass attempts, it doesn't matter how efficient of a receiver you are. You're going to catch a bunch of dump offs especially from a statue quarterback like Ben Roethlisberger at that time. So I have been sort of fooled by James Conner multiple seasons, and I'm going right back to it. Right, fade James Conner again.
I'm ready to get hurt again.
That's not how I'm wired, man.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think James Conner can beat me. I don't think David Montgomery can beat me. I don't think Zeke can beat me. You see what I'm saying? I'm not worried that Zeke is going to turn over 2 aces. I'm not worried at any point James Conner is suddenly going to become DeAndre Swift in the passing game, right? And this offense is going to be worse this year. So I'm not worried about him spiking the football with some aberrant touchdown season. It's no, especially after he only had like a handful of catches the first 8 games when Chase Edmonds was actually active. And what if Eno Benjamin essentially takes over that Chase Edmonds role? It's not clear to me, and he's certainly not making the amount of money that would point to a full bell cow role, right? Because that's the whole point. Anytime you're drafting a guy just because he's projected to get all the touches, the David Montgomery corollary, right?
Mike Davis last year, yeah.
Mike Davis was the Mike Davis trap, right? You're going to get Mike Davis trapped again. So I'm trying to avoid the Mike Davises. Now, James Conner's definitely got a better track record than Mike Davis. Certainly. Understood. But these are still post-apex running backs that are not necessarily plus pass receivers. And you're just projecting volume, and it's a projection trap. It's a volume projection trap. No, thank you. Every year we look back and we're like, oh, why didn't we boost up Jonathan Taylor? Right? We were too worried about all those Naheem Hines and Marlon Mack touches. So you can also inadvertently be underweight on a running back in particular because you're worried about how the touches are going to be distributed. And so I'm banking on the juice. It doesn't necessarily have to be that the coaches come to Jesus like they did with Jonathan Taylor last year. Yeah. It could be an injury, or it could be that the other player, like Tony Pollard, is so good that they have to get him on the field and basically play him like a receiver, like a slot receiver. And that's how he gets there. Right. So there's a lot of outs for Tony Pollard.
When the reason you're drafting somebody is because of one older person's just decision to say, hey, it's this guy, that's not a very strong level of job security.
That's shaky ground. I don't like it at all. So, but also it's fine because you're protecting yourself from getting run over by these players that have real sort of game-changing, league-winning upside, like a Javonte Williams. Like, I would never fade a player like that outright. I would say in a seasonal league, if it's me and I'm drafting there, I would rather take Barkley. I would rather take T. Higgins, because the probability of Melvin Gordon getting injured, given that he's not going to be seeing a full workload, is actually below 50%, that he's going to miss more than 1 game this year. So, and you saw it last year that it was and then you see it in practice, right? Melvin Gordon's got a hell of a lot more run with the ones this year already in training camp than Damian Harris. Wow. So right there, you got to be drafting Melvin Gordon before Damian Harris, because also that team is going to be better. There's going to be, I can count on one hand the players I'm avoiding in the AFC West, because I want essentially all of them. You mentioned Jerry Jeudy is one that I do not like, just because I don't draft players like him at that cost. It's just not something I do. He's not particularly fast. He's not particularly big. He has a track record of not being available. And so, yeah, he's a sort of it makes sense, right? He doesn't have lower body explosion. He doesn't have the ability to get the yards after the catch, like maybe a Golden Tate, right? So there's not some lever that you can pull and tell a story about how a guy like Jerry Jeudy is going to go off for like 1,200, 1,300 yards and a bunch of touchdowns. It's just not. This
is a tangent, but I love it. And
it's not it. I mean, he's not going to beat you.
Right.
But Rashod Bateman could absolutely rip your face off.
Right.
Yeah.
Rashod Bateman is a bigger, better, more refined, more explosive, better hands, better everything version of Jerry Jeudy, and he has the number one spot locked up. And if they had gone to different schools, like if Rashod Bateman went to Alabama and Jerry Jeudy went to Minnesota, it would have been Bateman that would have been drafted. He would have been drafted probably first overall. He would have been drafted before Ruggs that year.
Speaking of pulling the lever and, getting exciting things, what is your favorite draft memory of all time?
You mean actually the NFL
Like
draft?
live, like
No,
a
no,
live.
We understand a lot of players, they do the online stuff now. We are huge advocates because our league of record is an in-person draft. We do it big. We have a lot of fun. So we like to ask our guests, like you have any rituals, any kind of throwback league where you guys make sure you try to get together every single year and do something? And what was one of your best memories from that?
I used to do a big auction draft in person. Yeah.
Were you the auctioneer?
No. I was friends with a couple guys that we did a fantasy show on local public access station. So we used to go to the actual television studio and do it with real television cameras.
Oh, that's sick. We've been doing it wrong.
Yeah, it's really cool. Really cool. The funny thing is, my reach on YouTube with this little Sony camera that I have is like 500x what my reach was with like a
Public
full
access.
studio.
What year was that?
And a graphics package, and like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so it was like, it's the perfect distillation of how the internet has changed audio, visual, television, media,
Reach.
everything.
Matt, what year were you broadcasting through public access?
It was in Northern Virginia, and that was like 2005. 2006. I remember that we had this in person. So the two other hosts, they brought me in as like a third host because I couldn't be, my talent couldn't be denied clearly. So they invited me into their league, their in-person league.
Wrong decision.
And so I just remember the year Reggie Bush was a rookie. I remember when I got him in the auction at what I thought was a value. And he got hurt that year and he wasn't productive, but like, I was like, oh my God, these idiots. I was like, Reggie Bush is going to be like incredible. Like day one, right? He's going to be like, I don't know. I thought maybe he could be what Austin Eckler was last year. Right. I was like, he's going to, I think he was in New Orleans. I was like, he's going to take over that job. He's going to be a satellite back for the first couple weeks. I think it was Deuce McAllister was the other guy. I was like, he's going to be PPR league. I was like, these guys are idiots. Don't they realize what Reggie Bush is going to do in a PPR league with Drew Brees? It's going to be so on. Oh my God. I was just, and it happened, right?
Yeah.
Alvin Kamara. I thought I was getting Kamara.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I thought I was getting what Kamara ultimately, that should have been Reggie Bush. Right? I should have been able to like victory lap that, but yeah, he had a knee injury, I think that year or something. It didn't work out. And, but I ended up quitting that league in protest because I was competing for the final wild card for total points. It was record. It had to be record. And I thought it was going to be total points, and I found out it was like the next best record. And I was like, that is so lame. You're not going to have any total points wild card. So I was already annoyed at the format that it wasn't a total points wild card. Fine. And then the dude that was playing, the team that he was playing, the guy I was competing against for the final wild card spot, the guy he was playing benched all of his starters.
So you couldn't get in.
And I was like, it doesn't matter now. Like, this is you people are the worst.
That inspires a good
worst
question.
thing that's ever happened. I was like, I can't believe this.
We got to have a question.
There's no recourse for this. I was like, you should be ashamed of yourselves. How do you look yourselves in the face?
I want to ask a question to our future guests on like the worst taboos they've experienced in their own league. But Matt, what's a sound that you love? A sound you love? Going on a
sound that I love.
Direction. Yeah, a sound you love.
Oh wow. Opening a bag of chips.
Nice. Yeah, dude.
No, you know what a sound I love? You know the sound I love? The closing of an airlock.
Okay.
Oh.
I love that sound. Just the sucking of a whoosh, right? And then the quiet. Oh, that's cool, man. That's cool. I want to be on
ASMR
ASMR
right there.
so bad.
This is pretty good podcasting right here. Favorite swear word?
Oh man. Oh, there's just I don't know, from like when I was a kid, my favorite swear word was fuck stain. I used to just love that. I used to love calling people fuck stains, and I don't say it anymore because it's a little too crude, right? And I'm
Pretty
like,
literal.
fucking shit. Like, but going all the way to there's very, very little occasion to use that word, right?
Yeah.
I mean, very almost none.
When you're a kid saying fuck stain and you're an adult saying fuck stain, that has two different images.
It feels
that
very
are getting
youthful to
painted.
say it.
Yeah.
It takes me back, man.
Yeah,
It's
I like that.
It's the
sentimental.
nostalgia.
It's very nostalgic. Oh, that's one of the best. That's one of the best scenes of any show ever. The carousel scene in Mad Men. Do you remember this?
Oh yeah, big Mad Men fan.
Yeah.
Oh yes, and he's demonstrating the slideshow projector, and then he shows all his family, and he's like, yeah, some people talk about pop and flash and technology and what's next, but sometimes with a great campaign leverages something that is under discussed but equally powerful. Nostalgia. I was like, show. The tears running down like it's a corporate meeting.
Yeah.
Like, that was the thing. Like so many people, like the
talked
show
about
The
Hershey.
Office. So many people live these lives where you're doing these presentations all day and you're in corporate America. Yet there's so few actual shows that are any good, where it's like a setting that you recognize, like a conference room, right?
Yeah.
It's like, that's why those shows, if you could nail a show like that to where basically you're speaking to so many people's daily lives, show's going to be a massive monster hit.
I love that. What was the most amount of leagues that you've played in at one time?
Oh, it's got to be this year. I'm in so many dynasty leagues because I keep ramping up for our patrons, patreon.com/Podfather. They could challenge me in a dynasty league, and then I do, one or more new startups every year because it's the ever, never-ending demand.
Yeah.
But now we're doing best ball. But yeah, it's just a ton. And then a buddy's like, hey, can you take over? Like, it's a really exclusive league, and we'd really love to have you. And then the team is pretty good, and it was cool. I drafted yesterday. All I had was a first round pick, and I looked down and I'm like, I got Zeke and Dalvin Cook and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce and Julio Jones and Adam Thielen, and I'm like, well, this team is decrepit, right? Aaron Rodgers, super flex league. I'm like, this team is dead team walking. It's not quite good enough to compete with the two other best teams in the dynasty league. So I'm like, everyone's on the block. We're fire sale. Let's go. So what I'm trying to do in that league, and this is what I think I recommend people doing, is you try to pick off somebody's quarterback who doesn't quite know how powerful and valuable quarterbacks are. Like, 'cause people know it, but they don't really know it. Like when we are doing, like when we actually, all our rankings are super numbers based, based on value over stream and then 3-year projections into the future, looking back 3 years and discounting years based on, just different logic of whether you're in win now mode or whether you're in a productive struggle. And the super flex rankings, our super flex rankings, it's like 10 quarterbacks and Jonathan Taylor, right? Yeah. And most other dynasty services, they're going to sprinkle in receivers into the top 10 and more running backs. And it's like, nah, man, what are you doing? Right. You got to get a quarterback in super flex in dynasty, or it's basically,
you're going to have a bad time.
You're going to be just so frustrated, and you're going to be bending your will, and you're going to be just throwing trades against the wall, and no one's ever going to take them. So I'm like, listen, I'll overpay, man. I did this last year. I traded it was Zach Wilson and Tua and DeAndre Hopkins and a quality running back, all to just try to back up the truck and get Herbert, and the dude did it. So
that ends up being a wise move. We heard similar sentiments about that on the mock draft marathon from other analysts in super flex situations. It's probably not coming from this league now based on how decrepit it started off. But Matt, most exciting fantasy football moment in the 21 years since 2001. Do you have a most exciting fantasy football moment?
Yeah, it had to be with our, we had we played a lineup a couple of years ago that was top 5 in the Millie Maker. That was pretty cool.
Oh,
I think that was the year. I think that was that Kyler that the Seahawks Cardinals game.
nice.
I think we had a Kyler stack that with Lockett on the run back or something that was just absolute fire. And when you see yourself on DraftKings moving up into the top 20, into the top 10, and and then the game goes into overtime, and you're like, holy shit. And then what's always interesting is there's another team that's kind of like built like your team.
Yeah.
That comes and like passes you at the last minute. And you're like, no, what the fuck happened?
Almost like they added that team after.
You're like,
I
I was
just
looking
like
at
you,
that
like,
guy.
and then they pass you in the night. So that was cool. That was a really fun moment.
How about a favorite game day beverage, Matt?
So I make my own cocktails here.
Yeah.
I think margaritas are overrated because I do not like triple sec. I think that is like the worst liquor. It's right up there with like peppermint schnapps. Just disgusting, right? And these I don't understand how people can consume these super sugary drinks. Like they just make my face pucker, and they don't taste good to me. And you end up not feeling good. You get dehydrated. It's just they're
the
terrible.
worst hangover. Yeah,
it's terrible. They're just I don't get the fascination, because if you actually like tequila, okay, you can just I have like a whole lime. I just put tequila with like one of these big rock balls and just a whole lime and some salt and maybe a little seltzer water, maybe whatever. That to me tastes way better than any margarita, right? That has all this pop and flash and flare and simple syrup, right? Get the hell out of here, man. Gee, what are we talking about? I'm not saying it's like the more manly thing. I'm just saying it tastes better.
right.
Sure.
Yeah.
Margaritas are overrated, man.
Matt, when you're watching your game film, you're required 4 hours of game film each week. What do you like to eat as your best movie theater snack during that time? Is it a bag of chips? Are you going to double down?
So
with
I
the bag
put
of chips?
together this pretty amazing. I make my own popcorn in a big, kettle.
Oh.
A little bit of oil in there. You pop your own popcorn, and then I have like, different types of flavor. You could do like a cheddar, right? Or what I do like I have a garlic mill, so I love the garlic with some cayenne pepper. That's my garlic cayenne pepper popcorn, and then you can sprinkle like pistachios on that. You could even do a little like shavings of like chocolate.
A little Emerald Lagasse up in here.
Yeah, you can even do a little bit of
just kicked up
yeah.
this
You could grade. You ever tried this? You can grade a chocolate bar.
Yeah.
You think this man takes his fantasy ranking seriously?
That's an
Wait till you
incredible. That's
start
an
to
incredible.
talk
If you want a little
about-
sweetness, you can do that. You can put M&Ms in there. Right?
I like the
I mean,
Reese's Pieces in the
you can put
popcorn.
Reese's Pieces. Have you tried
you can
these
load it up.
these Hershey's bars that have the Reese's Pieces embedded in the Hershey bar?
inside it. Yes, I did.
Yeah, I had those.
They're getting wild over there.
at Hershey Park. I had one. Of those.
R&D at
why can't
Hershey.
we get these where I live?
I don't know. Don Draper finally got his dream job over at Hershey and got to bring the joy of childhood to everybody else around.
Yes.
Bring it back. Last question for you, Podfather. Kickoff is in 2 minutes. You're still deciding your flex and your league of record. Do you go with your gut or your weekly rankings?
Yeah, I've had too many gut malfunctions. So I go
all
with
that
the
popcorn.
rankings. I usually
It's
go with
the
the gut,
shavings.
but I'm always you can't if you go with the rankings, it's way less regret factor. So that's what I tend to go with. And we have PlayerProfiler.com in our DFS Dominator module. We have upside ratings. So I tend to just look at I really go on the upside ratings, which factor in the game total and what we think that how the game flow is gonna play out. And if we're projecting a shootout, then probably ends up being a player that has the highest upside rating, more likely to be in a shootout. As we talked about, probably a guy that's playing in the AFC West, right? AFC West. I mean, who? So it's what is it? Judy, James, Josh Jacobs, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Those are the only players I can think off the top of my head in the AFC West I don't want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this was a treat to get into the
Clyde
mind of
Edwards-Helaire
management.
is terrible. Do you guys realize
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Gallbladder
You know he's
or
a
not.
bust, right?
Oh,
You know he's never
yeah.
going to be good,
Yeah, oh, I'm on that.
right?
Yeah,
you know
I'm
he's
on that
sticking.
train.
It's totally over.
We've had
Yeah.
many arguments on this show about it.
But, you know he's really bad. Like he's small, slow, and now we've realized that he's a super inefficient pass catcher. So I mean, perhaps I guess it's possible he could be a Devin Singletary this year and have like 2 good games at the end of the year or something. But then they turned right around and drafted James Cook. So if you're saying his best, his best case outcome, if your best case outcome for your career is that maybe, possibly, you're Devin Singletary, that's a sad state of
not
affairs.
good. Yeah,
That's a sad state of- and the saddest thing is,
doom.
never forget, that was the draft class with not just Jonathan Taylor.
Jonathan Taylor.
That was
DeAndre
J.K.
Swift.
Dobbins. That was
Mhm.
Cam Akers. That was
DeAndre
DeAndre Swift.
Mhm.
So it's one thing to not get one of those guys, right? If it was between those two. But if you're drafting him first out of that 5, shame on you.
Yeah, you fucked
What
up.
could have
Troy.
been?
You
What
fucked
could have
up,
been?
Troy.
Shame on you.
All right, well, we'll rock into some of these news items here. We're going to start with Wandel Robinson. Peter King of NBC Sports says Wandel Robinson has been the star of the Giants' offense throughout training camp.
Mm-hmm.
Are you buying any of this,
Mhm.
Podfather, on
Mhm.
Wandel Robinson? How does he look
Mhm.
for player profiler?
Small players tend to do better early in training camp. And then as the pads start to come on, as the intensity starts to ratchet up, as you start to face number 1 corners instead of 5th string corners,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly these plays become a lot harder to make. Suddenly these players tend to disappear a little bit more, and you don't hear about them as much. Wandel Robinson is interesting in that he broke out very early. He was relatively dominant at Kentucky, right? With just a giant target share, a 99th percentile, 40% target share. I mean, he was the entire offense, 144 targets, right? Think about that. A target share of 40% is unheard of. So he was good at an early age, very active on special teams. The guy, I believe, is a great football player, right? Great football player, even at Nebraska, right? So I think that he's very interesting. And we have a breakout finder, an app that actually looks at, 50 data points on players from their college history, their workouts, everything, comps them to other players historically. And I was shocked that a player that isn't particularly fast at 180 pounds and 5'8", typically you got to go sub 4.4, right? That's been my rule of thumb, sub 4.4, if you're going to be 5'8", 180. But Wan'Dale, man, these other ancillary metrics, the breakout age, the college target share, they were so good that the breakout finder had him, I think like outside the big 5, just outside the big 5.
Wow.
Like ahead of Dotson, ahead of a bunch of other prospects I expected to be higher than him. And also, it loves the fact that he came out early. So you stack a bunch of these other things. I mean, then basically other than the fact that he's not the speed score, which is basically a size adjusted speed metric, that's 25th percentile for him. It's rare to see a 25th percentile speed score wide receiver truly break out in the NFL. Yeah. It can happen. If someone's going to do it, it's going to be him. It's also, the problem is it's Daniel Jones, and these offenses and these Brian Daboll schemes, they look great. They look great in training camp, but I'm a little skeptical. So I'm not the one that's running out best case scenario, propping up Kadarius Toney, propping up Wandel Robinson. The one guy I know that can produce no matter what the offense, no matter what the system, is Saquon Barkley.
Yeah.
So I'm tempering expectations just because, this guy coached Josh Allen, so he's going to turn Daniel Jones into this incredible offense. They upgraded everything, so they're going to be great. We'll see, man. We'll see, right? Again, it's one of those situations where only Barkley is going to beat you, right? no one's going to rip your face off in this offense. So if you choose to just sort of be like consensus on Wan'Dale or Tony or Golladay, you're not going to get hurt by that.
Yeah. And I just think, like you said there, like the decision-making process is what we end up relying on with Daniel Jones, and that's not a best-case scenario to be in if we're relying on that for these other players.
Wan'Dale is super redundant with Kadarius Toney.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're going to go out there and bench Kenny Golladay making $40 million.
Right. That's my big concern. Right?
I mean, Golladay is still the only receiver on that team with a 1,000-yard season.
Does anybody have a chance of jumping him? Like Sterling Shepard, anybody else? Like, or is it simply the contract? Tony, I mean, he's going to be there, right?
Listen, very few. You need a top 10 quarterback to really support two, weekly productive fantasy receivers, generally speaking. And what's interesting is, you look at the data on, wide receiver duos and how often, twice a year on average, they can finish as wide receiver ones when you're Thielen and Diggs. Like you get, Godwin and Evans. It's like two in the league, and it's usually like the team that led the league in pass attempts.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you get there, right? And then that was interesting was there were only 11 on average, 11 teams that have two receivers in the top 36. Which makes sense. There are 32 NFL teams.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's about 11 teams. Think about it. There's 11 teams who are going to have two top 36 wide receivers. What are the chances that the Giants are one of those
Giants
teams?
are one of those.
Probably not. Right? Probably not. So now
you're telling me there's a chance.
So now what are we doing?
Always.
We're really deciding between Golladay, Robinson, and Tony. You're throwing a dart on one of those three being the guy that's going to be the top 25 receiver from this team. Okay,
well,
a team where they're going to have to share the ball with Barkley.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. Right? Maybe. Probably not,
Maybe.
though.
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean,
the
I
draft
guess
capital
maybe,
for Kenny
possibly.
G is so cheap. That's why I think he's such a no-brainer because he's going like the 12th round, and it's like, okay, I'll take that because there is that upside there. We have seen it before, but
I mean, the one thing with Wan'Dale is that it's a bit of a warning shot at Tony, right? Tony's been hyped. Right? He's going before Golladay, even though he only has like one good game on his entire career. Okay, great.
It was a really good game.
A good game. He had one good game, and he's a Giant, and he was one of the more overrated first-round picks of all time. But sure, cool, yeah, push him up. Continue to push him up. Fine. what do I care? Right?
Yeah, we talked Giants here. We'll talk about Lamar Jackson. Ravens OC Greg Roman said Lamar Jackson, I think it's the best I've ever seen him throw thus far. We know, Johnny, that Lamar's kind of improved as a passer over his career. And are you buying this kind of hype coming in for Lamar this offseason here as a thrower?
I hope so. I mean, he's been talking about all offseason how he's, been working on it. So hopefully it does translate. I will say, watching some of those, no one covering anybody. There's no offense or defensive lineman or anything like that. Those spirals look pretty tight, but I also did see Kevin Cobb throw some pretty tight spirals in the same situation. So we'll see if it translates, but
he's a gamer.
Yeah,
I think he's a gamer. I mean, his throwing motion is horrific.
Yeah.
His throwing motion is wee. I don't understand how the hell he does it. Like you watch him, it's like, is that real? Is that real?
It's like the LaMelo Ball
it
shot,
is. It is
dude.
real, and it ends up actually being fine.
Yeah.
So
can I get your take? Actually, I'm going to take us off. I'm going to take us a little bit of a different direction here before we jump onto this because I genuinely want to know your answer to this, Podfather. You called Lamar Jackson just now a gamer. We ask, is he a good quarterback? People say no. I'm like, well, maybe he's not the best thrower, but there's a lot more than just throwing involved in the quarterbacking position. I think he is that dude. Where do you stand on Lamar Jackson as a quarterback for your NFL team?
I just think it was so funny. If you go back and watch the Pro Bowl, the accuracy challenge. Do you remember the accuracy challenge at the Pro Bowl?
Nah.
Where you have all these like
didn't Adam Thielen win that?
You have to throw through these hoops, right?
Okay.
And then sometimes some of them are moving, right? They're
oh yeah. They put like on a cart.
Yeah.
Or something.
And they have to go through a series, like an obstacle course and throw.
Yeah,
this dude,
this
dude like was like balls just go like he might have finished like with 0 points.
Like John Wall throwing out the opening
Like if
pitch.
you were drafting, you wouldn't have drafted him. Like you would know
Yeah.
if you would have if you
Sure.
were going on that, like you would have been like, this is not an NFL quarterback. He
No.
can't be drafted. We're 7th round pick. We're passing on Lamar Jackson after you saw that. Like it was that bad. But sometimes a guy will get in the game, and you see this sometimes with shooters in the NBA, where it's a little bit awkward, but it works, right?
LaMelo Ball.
And that's the thing. Like he will like do that thing, but if his hand-eye coordination is so next level, and you can do it on the fly and actually drop it in the bucket, he gets better when the game is actually happening. And if he's just standing there as a stationary guy and throwing, he's not good. It's very weird. Some athletes execute at a higher level when they're moving, when they're under duress. And that's Lamar Jackson. And so
He's
you
a gamer.
have to,
Hey, we
you
call
just
that.
have to accept it. Like I think 2 years ago, he had a 68% completion percentage. That doesn't happen by accident at the NFL level. You have to have some accuracy to make that happen. And
Podfather,
whether his throwing motion stinks, whether he in a vacuum in any given throw is not going to be, maybe top 100 in the league in terms of being able to hit particular targets at particular moments, fine. Let the bullet start flying and see what happens. And then he's awesome. That's why I'm so in on Bateman. So in on Bateman, because he has everything that you had with Keenan Allen, except he's also fast.
Except he's also fast.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, this was one of the better route runners we've seen come out of college. He came out early. He was a mega producer, right, at a school without one of these prolific offenses, Big Ten school. And then just the plays he made last year, where he's just got this subtle movement where he can get inside. And he reminds me of Justin Jefferson and his ability to squeeze the ball in traffic. That is so, when you watch some of these guys squeeze the ball in traffic in these tight windows, oh man, that's the next level. And it absolutely infuriates me. It infuriates me when you see these NFL teams take a guy like Kadarius Toney because they are enthralled with the athleticism or the nimbleness and all these things.
Tavon Austin.
And they lose the forest for the trees. Like at the end, don't you want a receiver that's going to put up like 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns and be like the go-to player on every single read progression? Not a guy that is kind of a fun joystick.
A specialist.
Yeah,
It's so crazy to me. It's so crazy to me.
And
Draft capital they
a guy like
spend on
that
these specialists.
is
Why?
not valued properly. Now, okay, if he wins the Heisman and goes to Alabama, right? Then and he's like smaller, slower, and like a basically a shell version of Rashod Bateman and Devontae Smith. Then they'll talk into that guy because he has the brand equity. He had the Alabama helmet, right? But this guy went to Minnesota, right? And it's just classic Ravens. They're so good at drafting, like Tyler Linderbaum and David Ajabo. I mean, just so many. Oh God, just chalk picks. Kyle Hamilton, chalk. Linderbaum, chalk.
Yeah.
Right. Ajabo.
What about Parris
chalk.
Campbell?
Just soak up the value. It's that easy if you're going to have people drafting Kadarius Toney in front of you.
We've got news on Parris Campbell. Shocking in the offseason. He's getting some hype here. We'll see if he can stay on the field. But there seems to be a strong connection brewing here for Parris Campbell. Podfather, I wanted to ask you, because a lot of what we saw out of the Colts last year, not saying they won't be lean towards the run. They have Jonathan Taylor, but a lot of what we saw seemed to be masking for Carson Wentz down the stretch.
Right.
Do you think that Matt Ryan opens up enough to where Parris Campbell can be a value, maybe Mo Alley Cox later, some of these other ancillary pieces outside of Pittman? Or do you think that it's just going to lean so much Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, that you'd not be interested?
Is there a running back that looks like Jonathan Taylor who's now sharing a backfield with Carson Wentz?
I mean,
Antonio
depends
Gibson.
on what.
How much you like Brian Robinson?
Antonio Gibson. So that what you just told me was the case for Antonio Gibson again. Right. So there's very few of these sort of ambiguous backfields. Am I going to go with the most expensive guy in drafts, except Antonio Gibson with that skill set? I think that He is the overlooked late round guy with max sky high upside. Okay. It would be one thing if he hadn't scored 10 touchdowns the last 2 years
On
each season.
on a
It'd be one
busted
thing if
shin.
he wasn't able to play on a broken leg. It'd be one thing if he wasn't a slick receiver. It'd be one thing if he wasn't like the lead leaguer, like right there with Jonathan Taylor and breakaway run rate the last 2 years. It'd be one thing if all these things were true. But there's the whispers about Brian Robinson and how much they love J.D. McKissick. It's all those things. It's like that shouldn't be what gets you off a guy, right? J.D. McKissick is not going to get me off a guy I like. Get out of here, right? It's the same thing with like Player X. I want to make sure players with actual like winning upside are the ones that I'm getting protected from. If you can't beat me, I'm not worried about not drafting you. And if you're not a real threat to be anything, I'm not letting you get me off really good players in situations that mirror the Jonathan Taylor situation this year. And I agree with you. It's going to be a little more pass friendly. The problem with Parris Campbell is I'm not sure he's better than Ashton Dulin, because Ashton Dulin has a similar skill set to Parris Campbell. Ashton Dulin can go deep. Ashton Dulin can run those sort of speed outs, right? And take the reverses. So a lot of the same things that Ashton Dulin does well, Parris Campbell does well. So it'll be interesting to see how they use them. I think it would be fascinating to see two guys that are both big, explosive, super versatile playmakers playing off each other, Campbell and Dulin on the field at the same time, just by posting Pittman up on the other side and letting him, go up against opposing alphas and win one-on-one. That necessarily means that Alec Pierce will have no role on this team. So if you're drafting Alec Pierce, it is a wasted pick. It is the worst rookie pick currently. No matter what his ADP is, it's always the worst pick. He was the worst pick in rookie drafts, right? So, I mean, he's worse. He's measurably worse, definitively worse than Ashton Dulin and Parris Campbell. Get out of here. He's Cody Latimer. He's Jalen Strong, but smaller. Get out of here.
Gas up here.
This Dulin guy.
Oh, no. Ashton Dulin, there's already news.
Justin Watson comped on Player Profiler. Player Profiler has Ashton Dulin comped to Justin Watson, and you are coming in with a ton of confidence here for our boy Ashton Dulin, who's set to now outperform Parris Campbell, once highly touted. Alec Pierce now highly touted.
He's going to
outperform
Ashton Dulin
now is the man. This is a hot ass take,
He's
Podfather.
outperform Alec Pierce. That Dulin's going to outperform Alec Pierce. I mean, you can write my name on that one. Put my name on that. Frank Wright essentially promises a role for Ashton Dulin in the offense this year. They're in love with his progression from special teamer to a playmaker with speed, per Nate Atkins today.
Yeah, I like that.
Here first.
Yeah. 60.9% breakout or college dominator with 99.
He went to Malone College. I mean, some of these guys, like the reason he comps to Justin Watson is Justin Watson had similar numbers at Penn. Okay, I get it. Like some of these small school guys, Jeff Janis, don't fire. But the problem is they don't necessarily always translate as football players, right? It was one thing to get off press coverage against the Ivy League cornerbacks, okay? The guy from Harvard, the Harvard cornerback was easy to toast and roast.
He's been studying film, okay?
Justin Watson. And it makes sense. Like if Ashton Dulin can't translate his game, his athleticism and playmaking over from Malone College, no one would be surprised. And then a funny thing happens. He makes the Pro Bowl and he's an all-pro special teamer, which tells you that he's at a different level of football player than the aforementioned, late round flameouts.
I love it.
Yeah.
And they'll get a longer leash when they're on special teams, right? Because the coaches love that.
He's an all-pro! Not even a Pro Bowler. They said he's the best. He's the best in the NFL at what he does. He's the best gunner in the NFL. And every time he was on the field last year, I looked up and he was catching a touchdown.
I like that.
Love it.
Yeah, love it.
Last bit of news here is on Kenneth Gainwell, who was practicing with the first team at the start of training camp. Podfather, I know you're a little bit jacked on taking Gainwell later, just fading Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders has come out and told us, don't draft me.
Don't draft.
He said he's frustrated, and the coaching staff, I don't know it was punishment for that, or they just don't like Miles Sanders. They don't have an allegiance to him. But we've got Gainwell running with the ones here. Podfather, are you buying in on some of this Gainwell hype?
How about this? How about this comp on Player Profiler? Have you guys seen? You use PlayerProfiler, right?
Yes, of course.
Some of these comps are eerie. Aren't some of these comps eerie? Don't some of these comps have like a shiver run down your spine?
They do.
Yeah.
But more oftentimes they get me
Especially when I'm trying to confirm priors. They definitely do.
Yeah.
Well, Miles Sanders to Felix Jones. How
Ooh.
Felix Jones has Miles
That dude
Sanders been?
haunts me, dude.
I
Don't bring up
mean,
Felix
Felix,
Jones' name right here.
that is so dead on.
Oh,
That is so dead on. Where it's like Felix Jones, and it's like, nah, man, they're going to give the ball to Marion Barber. Forget it, right? It's not happening, Felix. So this is the case. Miles Sanders is why I love this game. Where you have other sports where really the analytics are the full story, right? And it's counterintuitive because we run an analytics operation. But that analytics does not tell the full story, and that we have to go to the combine and we have to interview these guys and we have to go to the Senior Bowl. We have to try to understand them at a deeper level and understand how much of a beta Alec Pierce is, that he finishes last in Cody's dog rating among wide receivers, right? That matters. Well, no, Romeo Doubs also. So don't get fooled by Romeo Doubs.
Oh, what? He's getting major hype right now.
Oh, yes. Tajay Sharp all over again. Tajay Sharp.
Oh,
2.0.
God.
Oh, yeah, dude.
I
If
believe
you're
that.
svelte and you're not fast and you were sort of good but not great in the mountain wax, like Nevada, Boise, get out of here. Okay, maybe he'll be Cedric Wilson, right? He has a Cedric Wilson ceiling, Romeo Doubs.
Yeah.
Get out of here. Andy has a beta mindset. At least Cedric Wilson actually is like a mentally strong and super intense, passionate player of football. If you don't have that, you can have 70th, 80th percentile athleticism across the board. You can come out of college checking all the boxes. But if you don't have that sort of whatever that is, that passion that really elevates you as a professional, you can be you washed out of the league in a few years. And it's what keeps people like me that are, awash in analytics. It keeps us guessing. It keeps us honest. It keeps us humble. And it keeps us open-minded to other things. And the more I see of Miles Sanders, the more like Cody is in my head. Cody Carpentier, our sort of head of football, where he just says, hey, beta mindset. This is a beta mindset. And if you don't want it and you'd rather be playing video games and eating Skittles like Devontae Parker, then you can be the most sort of physically imposing and impressive player from your class. And it's just not going to fucking happen.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter. Okay. It didn't matter for Kevin White. It didn't matter for Rashod Bateman. It didn't matter for Corey Coleman. It didn't matter for Devontae Parker. All those guys from that class were all super athletic, right? And then you have guys that were overrated for other reasons, like Laquan Treadwell. That's another story, right? Miles Sanders is most likely a person who is just frustrated by the game and doesn't love what he does. And it takes a toll over the years. Those reps you don't get, those time you're not spending in the weight room, that it ends up adding up and adding up and adding up and adding up.
Oh, you could clearly see that in the interview he had where he was just defeated. Yeah. Like you could just clearly see mentally he was defeated by the state of the Eagles offense.
I would not take him. I would not draft him. He's not a player. He's not a player that's going to beat you. So I could see taking him in best ball, and if he's a value, sure, right? But my problem is, I don't think that he and Gainwell are cheap enough where I'd feel totally fine drafting both of them in best ball. I'd feel like I'm still betting against myself a little bit more than I'd like to in that scenario. The only running back duo I'd ever draft together, because handcuffing is betting against yourself. That's a beta move right there. Talk about a beta fantasy move, handcuffing, right? But the one scenario I would do, because they're just so inexpensive, and why not? The trade-off is so minimal, is Mack and Pierce. That's it, though. That's the list. So part of the reason is I know I'm going to overdraft Gainwell anyway, so I'm not bothering with Miles Sanders. Get out of here.
Mac talk. on a Sunday morning.
I
You
could
know
get
it's
into that,
getting
but
good.
it's been awesome talking with you, Podfather. So we spent like an hour on the intro stuff, but we love it. We're gonna get into though what we
Intro
brought
stuff.
you.
Love
Yeah,
it.
what we
That
got
was
you
the
in.
intro?
Yeah, that's it. Now we're starting. Now this is the meat now. We're going to talk the world famous draft kit with you. You know, we were talking with you, trying to get you on the show, and we wanted to highlight this thing because it is amazing.
Oh, the draft kit. Yeah, the draft is very cool.
So you say you can win your draft with analytics-based team insights and the most comprehensive player breakdowns. The world famous draft kit changed fantasy football draft prep forever. Roto Underworld completely reimagined the draft kit concept by combining the readability of the magazine with PlayerProfiler's technical horsepower. And the draft kit will not bury you in an avalanche of mediocre whiz-bang tools and lukewarm content. We instead focus on the 3 critical aspects of a quality draft guide: team insights, player analysis, and cheat sheets.
Podfather,
Podfather,
let me explain this.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
the question. How should somebody be able to use
Let
this?
me explain this. Let me explain
help.
this. I don't like draft kits that have a billion different options in the menu. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to use all these tools. I don't have the time. I just don't have the time. Most people don't have the time to go explore every tool and try to figure it out, right? And you need like an instruction manual, okay? And I don't like these spreadsheety like feels, right? I want to be able to pull this up on my phone, have it be slick and easy, super mobile friendly, and focus on what matters. So certainly a cheat sheet is very important. And, you know, we have all the different scoring settings plus super flex plus auction. And what the beauty is, it's dynamic. So the cheat sheet, you can open up any player in the cheat sheet and then you get their exact projected stats per Dario Offstein, our head of analytics, and a write-up from a number of, we have over 100 analysts from around fantasy football that contribute individual write-ups to these players as well as our team. And then we project like total usable weeks, their strength of schedule, all these things. And not only that, we also have a video on every player breaking down all the players that are relevant. I mean, we don't have a video on like Doolin, right? We have like 300 guys.
No, because we just made it right now.
Right, but we're probably going to be working on one, right? And then of course you can export and do all that. And then as players get drafted, you can check them off and it crosses them out. It's cool. The other aspect is the team insights, so that you can understand what makes these teams tick and which teams are going to exceed expectations in terms of play volume, you know, so that especially pass volume, that's really what matters. Okay, that's really, and we have the underdog best ball mode to everything that we do here as well, because Underdog's a great sponsor, an all-time sponsor for us. And so we have a number of high stakes writers like Ike Azar and Theo Greminger, who help to write these team insights, and they get into the thinking of high stakes players and how they target certain teams, especially with their schedules. Like, so for example, the Bengals, right? Probably not going to want to be overweight on Joe Mixon in any kind of format that has a playoff structure, any tournament level format, because he has the worst run game schedule in the fantasy playoffs you've ever seen, right? It's like the Bills, the Patriots, it's a nightmare. Okay. Yeah. However, it's counterintuitive that yes, those are, and you can go to the team insights and we have all kinds of data like vacated targets, vacated carries, vacated air yards, strength of schedule per week. And you could see, oh, there's a lot of red on there, but counterintuitively for the passing game, as long as the other quarterback on the other side is also an above average quarterback, then you're probably looking at a shootout no matter what. It's just like when Buffalo plays Kansas City, right? Yes, Buffalo has a good defense, but you're not that worried, because what you really are banking on is that Josh Allen is going to propel Mahomes, and then Mahomes is going to propel Josh Allen. So as long as you can see a path to shootouts happening, regardless of the strength of the defense. So that's kind of where the strength of the defense matters more for running backs. When a front seven comes to town that can blot out the sun, you know what happens. Those are the weeks that Mixon puts up 30 yards and 7 fantasy points, and it's a bummer. but that can happen to players that, especially like Mixon, aren't as involved in the passing game. Whereas with a guy like Fournette, a guy like Swift, a guy like Barkley, even if when they face one of these teams with a ferocious front seven, they're still going to get plenty of dump offs. They could still catch a touchdown coming out of the backfield, like Fournette in the playoffs. Remember that a couple of years ago? He was catching all these passes from Tom Brady and scoring. So that's how that could happen, where guys that aren't as involved in the passing game, like a James Conner, like a Joe Mixon, even a Derrick Henry, we're below consensus on Derrick Henry, right? We are. Unless it's a standard league, I'm probably not getting any Derrick Henry, because you have these games where these guys get nuked and nullified. And so that's where they're better in best ball, right? So if you're going to draft a running back in a traditional league, and in our cheat sheet accounts for this, that you're going to want to have a guy that has outs, right? Like Fournette has outs. Swift has outs. No matter what the game scenario is, right? There's levers that he can pull and get there no matter what happens in the game. And that's what you're looking for. And that actually isn't something that Derrick Henry offers. Nick Chubb doesn't offer that. So, we're generally below consensus on those kinds of running backs. And we're also not above consensus on the running backs that are just pure volume plays, like a Najee Harris. I like Najee Harris, but this offense could be quite bad. Even though they're getting an upgrade, it's technically an upgrade, whatever quarterback, because Ben Roethlisberger was so bad. But this offensive line was no good last year.
Yeah, it was
okay. It was really, and it's very possible this offense is completely stuck in the mud. The schedule got harder. I don't like it at all.
Their schedule is one of the hardest in the league.
It's terrible.
Brutal. It's
brutal. And we have this we were Anand and I, we have a show called The Decision Point, and we were going through the Pittsburgh schedule because on Caesar Sportsbook, promo code Podfather 15, they're 7.5. Now it's like minus 135. So you're not getting full freight on that under, but look at the start of their season. Bengals, Patriots, Browns, Jets at home. They better win that game. Bills, Bucks. And then Dolphins, then at Miami, at Philadelphia, bye week.
But then after their bye week, it's brutal again as well.
It's
so
crazy.
It's like, I don't think that's why when people are like, oh, when's Pickens going to come in here? I'm like, what? Like they have why they're not going to be playing him. Why would they play him this year?
Look at these front sevens they're facing. And even New Orleans, great front seven, right? I mean, it's not until week 13 that you're like feeling great. Maybe the Jets,
throw them in,
maybe depends, right? It's a home game against the Jets. You're feeling good about Harris. Week 4, you just ask. This is a question I like to ask. Thought experiment. I'm on the draft and look at this schedule. What weeks will DFS people be on Najee Harris? I can find 2 weeks at Atlanta and Jets at home.
2 out of 17.
Yeah, out of 17.
Yeah,
you're going to be like,
tough.
Yeah,
it's very tough. So and we have their projected rush attempts being down because they're going to be losing, right? They're not going to have positive game scripts. So that's a pretty fragile projection for Najee Harris, that it's just total volume and the fact that there's no one behind him. Yeah, there's no one behind him until they sign someone. Right? Yeah. That's always the case. There's never anyone behind anybody until they sign somebody. And then all of a sudden there is somebody behind him, and it's like, oh, okay.
Or James Conner comes along.
Yeah, it's like what now there's values on players that aren't going to get all the carries, but they're going to get the valuable carries, and their offense will be better. So like Chase Edmonds, it's the opposite, right? Yep. Offense getting better, and he himself highly skilled, one of the league leaders in yards per touch the last couple of years.
Friend of the show,
right? Yes, he's a whisperer.
He is,
and he's going to be getting red zone touches, just like Gainwell. Remember all those red zone touches Gainwell was getting? You don't have to be 220 pounds to get red zone touches. He's going to get plenty of red zone touches. They have him because he's great at the inside zone. They're going to run inside zone in the red zone and inside the 10 and inside the 5, and he's going to be getting all those passes from Tua, because Tua likes to keep the ball shallow and didn't really have an electric receiver out of the backfield last year. So there is the other end of the spectrum where you're looking for teams that are improving and what players are going to be towed along with the improving team. Those are the players, especially if they have all-purpose skill sets and they score fantasy points in the areas of the field where PPR points are generated, then that's an easy case to build for a guy like Chase Edmonds. Very easy case to build. Much harder to build a case for Harris. Much harder to build a case for Mixon. And generally speaking, I prefer that profile, that DeAndre Swift profile, that ETN, Breece Hall, Chase Edmonds profile, a guy that, probably will max out at 60% opportunity share. Fine. But I know he's going to be catching passes.
More valuable anyways.
Yeah, you can't be phased out. I like that.
Well, speaking one more thing on the team insights here, we've got the Tennessee Titans here. You show vacated targets, vacated air yards, vacated carries, all these things within this beautiful setup for the team insights. No team's got more vacated air yards or targets than Tennessee. We've started to see Burks kind of shed this narrative of the asthma and conditioning this week. Are you going to buy back into the Treylon Burks hype here, Podfather, or are you fading him for some of the
what have we talked about?
The dip?
Yeah.
What have we talked about?
A guy that can beat
Player
you.
X at ADP beat me.
Yeah.
Absolutely he can. You got to be very careful.
Yeah.
You got to be, like I said, you got to be very careful fading him. I'm getting all my exposure to Javonte Williams in best ball just because I don't want to eat those 7-point weeks where Gordon gets the touchdowns in a traditional league, but I'm happy to get all the spike weeks in best ball. Burks, I'm in everywhere. Like there's 3 like pillar wide receivers that, the football guys that where the breakout finder likes these players, our algorithm, the app in the app store, but also the football guys like these guys, right? And these 3 guys are Burks, Sky Moore, and Chris Olave. Okay. Burks, Sky Moore, Chris Olave, and to a lesser extent, Jalen Tolbert.
Yeah, baby. Tolbert. Okay. Let's go.
Right. It's Tolbert, but that's an easy one. That's just a no-brainer late. I'm talking about in that area, right? Round 7, 8, 9. That's what I'm talking about, where Burks, Olave, yes, London, but I think London's just, he's a good player. He's at cost. It's fine. Right. It's just, this is a bad offense. Even the stutter and go where he caught the touchdown that was on Twitter, it was underthrown. Right. It was vastly underthrown. I was like, oh God. I mean, that looks pretty, I'm glad he made the play and everything. But it's still going to be Kyle Pitts. And if we're projecting Kyle Pitts to be like a 3rd round pick, that team's not going to sustain 2 top 36 receivers. If you imagine, we talked about 11 guys, right? 11 teams per year support multiple top 36 wide receivers. If you imagine or classify Kyle Pitts as a receiver, it's impossible for Mariota / Ritter to get there. So I'm not as worried. The Tennessee offense is going to be much better. There's a clear path for Burks to be the alpha in that passing game right away. So he's much more dangerous in that he can really beat you. He could really run you over. You close your eyes, you can't really envision a scenario where Drake London really runs you over. It's nice to have. He's certainly, when he slips, it's great, right? And I'm going to take him over guys like Lazard and all those cast of characters, Tony and all those guys. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'd chase that rainbow. Fine. But the 3 receivers I want are, if I could get them, right, I think it's possible. I think what's going to happen is Michael Thomas returning is going to suppress Olave. Burks is going to elevate as he, continues to put his wow factor practices and plays in practice out there on the internet. So I think it's possible to go Burks and then Olave and then Sky Moore. You could go back to back to get those 3. You could get all 3 of those rookies. Because Sky Moore had the #1 dog rating by Cody Carpentier.
We were talking about this dog rating. Like,
what kind of dog is it?
Yeah, what kind of dog is it?
How big is the corgi?
It's the dog. No, it's not a. No, it's not. No, these are vicious.
Not that ferocious.
These are vicious dogs. The three guys, the clear big three with the dog rating are George Pickens, Sky Moore, and Treylon Burks. And the guys from Roster Watch, they have Chris Olave as the best route runner of the last 5 years.
Wow, so better than Jerry Jeudy? Because that was Jerry Judy's number one thing.
Jerry Judy's not even a good route runner. Okay, he's not even a good route runner. He has bad hands.
The internet told me so. Okay,
he's not even
okay, Matt. The internet
he's not.
Told
yes,
us.
he's. Oh God. So, I mean, he's a lesser Devontae Smith, and I'm not into Devontae Smith either, right? So it's like the Wan'Dale thing. If you're gonna be this stick figure or midget receiver, I prefer you to blaze. I prefer you to run a 4-3-5. Most of the time, the sort of the T.Y. Hilton, John Brown rule.
Yeah,
you got to run a sub 4-4.
You got to have something in the bag of tricks.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough.
You
remember D.D. Westbrook, right?
Oh,
the danger is these types of receivers get D.D. Westbrook, where they were explosive enough in college, but not explosive enough at the NFL level, and they just don't have that accelerating ability. That's why you got to be wary of Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin's lurking out there, right? He actually has the deep separating ability, where the upside is capped for some of these other receivers. Sky Moore is one of the few small school receivers like Devontae Adams. It's so rare to come out early. He came out early and he was drafted early and he went to the right team. It was an absolute gift, especially shame on the Colts. Like, you can talk about Wan'Dale, right? You can talk about even the Tyquan Thornton debacle, right? But you can't, there's absolutely no case for Alec Pierce over Sky Moore. So shame on Chris Ballard. That was a joke pick.
We should have wrote that this is the Alec Pierce roast show.
I'm here for it. Maybe I'm here for it. I've been trying to.
Cody Carpentier had to leave the Senior Bowl. Cody Carpentier had to leave the Senior Bowl early, and he sat down and across the aisle was Alec Pierce, who also bailed on the Senior Bowl halfway through.
Oh, damn.
And he immediately put out his notepad. He's like, dog rating 0. After he wasn't good at the Senior Bowl, right? Wow. After he was, no show. Well, Tolbert was dominant. Watson had a quality Senior Bowl. It was a relative no show at the Senior Bowl. Just a pathetic pick by the Colts. And so now the decks are cleared. He's over the hamstring injury. Sky Moore's over the hamstring injury. The decks are cleared. I think what's going to happen is you saw a bunch of wow factor plays and circulating hype around MVS in shorts, and I think his limitations are gonna become apparent. And it's just Sky Moore is the best receiver they have outside of Travis Kelce on that team, and they're in the AFC West. So that's the guy I want, but also it's also very possible with Michael Thomas, with Olave. I'm just trying to get it in my head. I would go Burks over all these guys because of he's the one guy that could really rip your face off. Then Olave over Moore, because I think it's possible that you remember when Des Bryant took forever to come back from that foot injury at age 29, and then he was complete dust.
Yeah. And
I was surprised. Weren't you surprised didn't you think Des Bryant would be better when he came back? Because he wasn't that old.
No. Well,
but you take that time off of football, whether you're Josh Gordon, Des Bryant, you take that long, sometimes it doesn't come back.
Right.
So if it doesn't come back, what's the probability it doesn't come back for Michael Thomas? Let's say it's 45% chance it doesn't come back.
I was going to say 50 or something. Yeah.
Bingo, right?
How do you keep the appetite
coming through? What imagine that world.
Yeah.
Imagine that world for Olave. It's going to be completely on, in that he can operate better in all quadrants of the field than any receiver from this class.
Well, and I just think they'll probably use him mostly as the deep threat this year, right? And I think that really lines up.
We'll see.
They'll probably use him all over because he can run all over. But I mean, as far as like the majority could be as the deep threat, and that lines up really well with Jameis Winston.
Big plays, dude. Yeah, there's gonna be big plays.
People are getting their faces snatched.
I love it. I'm very intrigued because he was one of the lowest in the league in yards after the catch per target in college football last year. And yards after the catch is a sort of transient metric in that it's ephemeral. It can be there one year and then it's gone the next. It's not sticky. Air yards much more sticky. So I am curious, super curious to see, because Alec Dunlap and from Roster Watch and Cody insist that Olave's fine after the catch. So, we'll see if it was just an anomaly last year with his yak.
So I had looking at your draft kit as well. Noticed that you had two, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, that two teams typically each year can produce two top 12 wide receivers. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, a popular one. Mike Williams and BMW, or Keenan Allen, are two of those that we project. A lot of people are projecting this year as well. What is like an outside team that we might not be looking at that could potentially be either a third team or replace one of these duos where you could have two top 15 receivers from that team, and we're not really talking about it? It's going to be Minnesota, like they've been a couple of times over the last 3 years.
No.
Yeah.
Thielen is how old?
Rams.
Isn't Thielen going to be 33?
I mean, but
you know what happens when these guys hit 33?
I do.
Right, when they're not Antonio Brown, they're not Steve Smith.
Statistically, you have
a good
shot. Yeah, but is it the Rams again? I mean, the Rams is kind of an easy one to throw in there as well, because they basically do it as long as their two receivers stay healthy. You're going to have a wide receiver set that is going to produce two top 15 receivers, and you've got Allen Robinson and you've got Cooper Kupp. But I asked your opinion, not mine. So.
It's tough, man. It's tough. What ends up happening is, would you actually look at it and look back, it tends to be that a duo emerges because of injury. So here's what could happen, right? High ankle sprain for Darren Waller in week 1. It's actually possible that it could be an Adams.
Let's go, Hunter Renfrow, baby.
Yeah,
Let's go.
I'm just saying that's how it works out, and that the reason why is you got to draft a guy like Renfrow because it's the AFC West, like I said, right? And the thing with Judy is there's Tim Patrick there, right? There's two good pass catching receivers. There's two good pass catching tight ends, right? Behind Cortland Sutton, it gets very murky. But in Las Vegas, I mean, they shed Zay Jones, right? So it's actually more consolidated than you might think, and that offense is going to be a threat to lead the league in points.
Mm-hmm.
Derek Carr is maybe the best bet, sleeper bet in the futures market to win NFL MVP because he's going to put up huge numbers. Because think about it, it's every week. It's the Broncos. It's the Chiefs. And that's the thing with these team insights, where you go to the draft kit and you're like, look up the Raiders and you're like, oh my God, how are they projected to run so many plays? How are they projected to score so many fantasy points? And it's like, oh, look at this schedule, right? It's like some of these games are either shootouts or blowouts.
Yeah.
And the Raiders are on the right side of the shootout and the blowout. It's like, look at this: Chargers, Broncos, Chiefs, then Texans, right? Then Jaguars. Then it's back to Broncos, Seahawks, Chargers, Rams, Patriots. It's like they can't
the exact opposite of Pittsburgh's schedule.
Yeah, you want a team with who's facing a difficult schedule, great offenses, and specifically great quarterback play on the other side, week in, week out, and that's what their schedule is indicating here, and that they have a better offense than a defense.
Podfather, you are second to none in the amount of analysis that you have incurred for this season.
My sleeper. That's my sleeper.
This on the sleeper. I got more questions here about the sleeper. You mentioned Derek Carr at the quarterbacking position. Can you share another sleeper pick that you are personally targeting in the earlier rounds as well as in the later rounds for redraft?
Quarterback or any position?
Any position. Your personal favorite. It's your league of record. Your home.
What has the kit kind of revealed to you?
Yeah.
And then
Well,
boiled down into your
yeah,
own gut, which I know you
What is
value.
the
Your gut.
fire?
This is why I like coming on other people's podcasts, that people aren't tired of my takes that might be new, right? So here we can talk about one Tony Pollard, right? Because I don't talk about it on my podcast anymore because my audience is like, enough already, shut up.
We get it.
Right? But here's the thing. This team had one of the easiest schedules you've ever seen. And they benefited. Not only did they benefit from the easiest schedule ever last year. I mean, it really was a joke season for the Cowboys, that they absolutely crushed the regular season and then face planted in the playoffs. It was just so classic Jerry Jones Cowboys. Just chef's kiss, like exactly what you would expect, right? But when you dig into the numbers in the draft kit, you're like, oh, wait a second, this is interesting. They were top 5 in pace of play, even though they had all these. They were number 2 in game script, so they were leading by like 5 points on average any given game at any given time. Why? Because they were going against Taylor Heineke and Mike Glennon. Go look at their schedule from last year and look at the quarterbacks they faced throughout the season. A joke. Right. And that's why they led the league in turnover differential. Are you surprised that Mike Glennon turned the ball over and Taylor Heineke was turning the ball over? Why would you be surprised by that? The thing that's so interesting is, in spite of all that, that Kellen Moore said, do not stop. Do not relent. Do not slow the game down. Push, 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 push. Now, they were running a lot of run plays. Okay. Their pass to run ratio was low. Imagine a world where the schedule gets harder. Okay. They're no longer up. They're down. They're going to be running at a fast pace no matter what. That's been established. That's like the sticky trend from last year. They run fast. They could run faster. So now if you're down, if you're already wired in a way, and you saw this in Hard Knocks, right? They wanted to play with pace. And they did, even with a lead. Playing with pace with a lead is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to play with an even faster pace if you're behind. So now I'm looking at their schedule going, oh my God, there's going to be a lot of points scored. This is the case for CeeDee Lamb in the first round. Okay, this is it. It's not CeeDee Lamb. It's not the law of the conservation of targets, which is the term I made up with all the vacated targets. It's that schedule. It's the shootout schedule. It's going to be wild, and they're going to have to throw. And I'm sure Dak's going to fixate on CeeDee Lamb. It's why I'm drafting Dalton Schultz, even though it doesn't feel good because he's not that explosive. You can't, given that you can get him late enough, you don't feel bad that it's more of a projection play than anything else.
Yeah.
You just can't deny.
Yeah, it's like baked into his
It's
ADP.
a floor.
for sure.
You can't deny the targets.
We're sometimes
So
okay
for that
with
reason,
play.
knowing that there's going to be so many, that Dallas could lead the league in points. They could lead the league in points scored, especially if they don't get the turnovers like they did, or they do get the turnovers. Imagine Micah Parsons gets a lot of turnovers again. They get some defensive touchdowns. That's the path to leading the league. That's why they're an interesting play to say that they might lead the league in points, because the odds makers are looking at last year where, they if they're going to be playing fast, no matter what, you want them to face more Buccaneers, Bengals, an improved Giants team, Rams, Lions are going to be improved, right? So the Lions are an interesting team in that, unlike the Steelers, they could have one of the best offensive lines in the sport.
Yeah.
Now, that's great for everybody. It's great for even Jamal Williams, right? I don't even hate Jamal Williams because of that fact. That's an interesting reason to maybe draft him late if you don't get Swift. But it's also an interesting case for a pocket passer having plenty of time to throw it deep to
Jamison Williams.
DJ Shark. DJ Shark is a sleeper wide receiver that has a lot of upside. This guy's 1,000-yard season. He's a big play. Kenny Golladay, doppelganger. And Kenny Golladay had some really impressive fantasy seasons.
Yeah.
And you can get him very late. So he's probably the sleeper in wide receiver I would like for best ball. And then Pollard in this context of this offense. Okay, what we found with the Injury Finder app that's rolled out now in the App Store is that total touches and total tackles these guys face really is the tail that wags the dog, right? Injury history matters, BMI matters, but the Derrick Henry rule is if you're going to feed a guy 400 touches, he's going to go down, and shame on you for doing that to him as a coach. So if Tony Pollard can't lose, because if they decide to make him a more featured breather back and have him operate in the slot because they're super talent deprived in the passing game, then he's going to have big spike weeks with Zeke or not. If Zeke carries all the between the tackles touches and they feed Zeke as they keep saying they will, which I don't necessarily believe, but so what? Pollard can't lose. If Zeke ends up taking on a huge workload early, well, his probability of getting hurt jacks way up. And then you ask yourself that question. How many, where, do run the thought experiment. What's Tony Pollard's ownership going to be in DFS?
Right.
When he's thrust in that starting
100%.
lineup, right? So there's he could easily outscore Najee Harris this year, right? If Najee Harris even getting far fewer touches because he's going to be active in the passing game and he's going to be on a team that's going to be going up and down the field with Dak instead of whoever, Kenny Pickett, and getting in there in the red zone. And think about all the injuries guys can have. A guy like Zeke, if you're putting him in that many car accidents on a football field, you're going to give him 20 carries a game. It's not just knee injuries. These guys miss games. Cam Akers missed half of a season with torn rib cartilage. There's all these injuries that these guys can get, and ankles. You can say, oh, this guy can play hurt. A lot of injuries, guys. Do you think Derrick Henry's not tough enough to play on a broken foot? Of course he's tough enough. It's just impossible.
That's
this
the
idea
perfect
that Zeke's going to play on impossible to play on injuries is a complete fairy tale.
It's not going to happen. And I love the Pollard take. I've been taking a lot more in Pollard on our mock draft marathon. Saw that one
destroy you.
Shooting.
He could really destroy you. If you're going up against someone with Pollard, that is a league winner.
He's got that league winner.
That is what a league winner looks like. You can't talk Javonte Williams is a league winner in the late second round. That's not a league winner, man.
No, the league winner is the one you get down later.
That's not a league winner. A league winner is you get a top 5 running back in the second half of the season, drafted in round 9.
Right.
I love that
That's
take
a
on
league
the
winner.
one. You mentioned Derrick Henry here, and bring it over to a little bit of a lighter subject here as we start to wrap it down. Over on Player Profiler, the player comparison tool is fucking awesome and has given the entire world that we operate in new language and thought experiments and great fun variables to play around with here. When you look Derrick Henry up in Player Profiler, the comp is Zangief. So my question is, have you ever been tempted to go in that direction for another player? And if it was, can you share a little bit about which player you thought about going in a more animated direction for the comp?
We did. We comped Kelvin Benjamin to Gargamel.
Okay. Kelvin Benjamin.
Right, because when he came out, he was like 6'5", 250, and he was like towering over every other receiver like Gargamel, like in the Smurfs. And he also is just this lumbering nothing. And if Gargamel was a football player, he'd be about as good as Kelvin Benjamin. So that made a lot of sense, right? It's still on the site. You can go see it. No one goes to the Kelvin Benjamin page anymore.
The hit rate on that.
But really what the genesis of that is that Kelvin Benjamin has no good comps in the database. So neither does Derrick Henry. So there's no one you can comp Derrick Henry to that makes sense.
So then you start thinking about it. Who would you fill in, and then you do it?
Yeah. So you just gotta come up with a cartoon character at some point. It's like he's not.
Nobody comes up in the database.
There's no one in the database to comp him to. It's like 0 results. So it's like okay.
I've seen you guys also put like obviously Cooper Kupp's got his animation on him, and then you had Benny Snell. I think had the snail. Is that correct?
Just a joke.
And
you got the other ones that are really
your
funny
boy Zach Moss has the Michael Jordan crying face.
Yeah, as he should.
Yeah,
Zach Moss stinks.
Horrible.
Yeah, what's interesting about Zach Moss is I was drafting some Zach Moss last year based on our core principles. Meaning if we have an offense that's projected to pass a lot and could lead the league in points, then if you can get potentially their starting running back in the double-digit rounds, then you got to draft him. And it doesn't matter. Like, again, this isn't James Conner, David Montgomery in the 4th round. This is dudes in the 10th and 11th round. That's a different ball game. I'm happy to draft, like I said, a Jamal Williams guys that I would normally be repulsed by, like just repelled. But okay, this could be the most in Detroit could be the most improved offense, and he could actually out carry Swift, just apples to apples. So and both these guys could be fantasy assets, especially if this offense takes a step forward. We think it will.
Yeah.
So there's a case to be made at cost on a guy like Jamal Williams. There's also a case to be made this year, which is very much the Zach Moss of this season, on Ronald Jones. That yes, this guy isn't necessarily winning, getting the ball in all the areas of the field that you're going to generate fantasy points, but there is that one area where if it's a top 5 offense and he's the touchdown scorer, then I'm happy to dabble. And if it doesn't work out, okay, I'll drop him. As long as it's not a trade-off like a real league winner, once the Pollards are off the board, then you can start to say,
dabble
okay,
in the other ones.
Who could actually score 10 touchdowns this year?
Treylon Burks, you're on the clock. Treylon Burks or Ronald Jones? Who you going?
Oh, Burks. No, Burks
Treylon
goes
Burks.
rounds earlier. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you want Burks there.
Well,
basically, Jones is a guy you draft right after a Melvin Gordon goes. Right.
Yeah.
So after because Melvin Gordon has basically, there's some guys like that are going Pollard, Gordon, Stevenson. Right. Once those guys are off the board, guys that have more all-purpose skill sets that are also could be in impressive offenses. Stevenson's running with the ones. Melvin Gordon could be in one of the best offenses in the league and the best division to be in fantasy football.
Narrative with Russ Wilson.
Yeah, you definitely want you want some exposure to at cost from especially zero RB teams. Melvin Gordon be great. He's the new Matt Forte.
Well, he's this year's James Conner too. Like if something were to happen to Javonte, it feels like you could see Melvin Gordon score.
Melvin Gordon be a total
touchdowns.
smash. Melvin Gordon. I mean, the upside is crazy. And also the Javonte upside is predicated on a Melvin Gordon injury. They have the same injury probability.
Yeah.
Right. Melvin Gordon's demonstrated health the last few years, and Javonte doesn't have much of a track record yet. They're both going to have similar number of touches, similar injury probability in that case.
Yeah.
So I think Burks is someone you need to be aggressively acquiring. I think it's okay if you were playing it safe, in the last couple months, being like, hey, I'm not sure what Burks. A lot of these guys that don't play in training camp, they're really behind and they don't end up firing as rookie wide receivers. So that case was fine. But as soon as you get the news
footage
breaks,
of real football,
as soon as you know that Burks is out there and he's looking good, then you readjust and go from there. It's not a big deal. The one rookie that I'm really not drafting at all is Garrett Wilson. It's a very difficult case. We talked about the odds, 11 out of 32 teams that have 2 top 36 wide receivers. Zach Wilson's not going to be the guy that gets him there. Yeah. Right. Already you were imagining Tua is going to get 2 guys there. That's already a stretch.
Right.
Zach Wilson in the same division. No way. Yeah. Right. And who's it going to be? It's definitely Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore, for as good as Garrett Wilson was, even though he's drafted in the second round, Elijah Moore, a more impressive prospect.
When someone shows you who you are, believe them. And Elijah Moore has shown us.
Yeah. He's one of the league. He was a top 10 in route win rate, which is as a rookie, which is a new metric on PlayerProfiler.com. At least top 20. Super impressive with some of his sort of isolated efficiency metrics on PlayerProfiler.com. So just be in on Elijah Moore and be happy. And don't worry about anyone else. There's a ton of offenses where I'm like, I'll pick a winner. And because it's not a prolific offense and it would be a very thin thread in order to try to justify, then I'm out on everybody else. Like people are trying to build a case for Chase Claypool. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why? It's going to be Deontay, and that's all I'm worried about. Yes, Pickens is going to be a thing in the years ahead. But not this year. Right, you can wish cast it, but that's not this offense.
So,
right?
Podfather,
just like with Garrett Wilson, it's not this year. We'll see next year. Let's see how it goes. But just be happy you have Elijah Moore. Why do you got to get greedy and also,
and want everything else
out Garrett Wilson? Like it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, so you've kind of alluded to these core principles, maybe even philosophies that you lean on. I'm wondering, for fantasy football, for this player evaluation, which you've just championed in this industry, what do you lean on specifically for like a core principle or a general philosophy in those realms?
Yeah, I think that you want to follow the points. It sounds really simple, but follow the points. And there's so many inefficiencies in every draft where you have players on bad teams getting overdrafted. I like Kyle Pitts. I really like Kyle Pitts. In a vacuum, I really like Kyle Pitts. But I got to squint in the third round on that team. You've got to remember, once real football starts, no one's going to be rostering any of these guys in DFS. Do you understand that? Do you understand? I love DJ Moore. No one ever owns him in DFS.
Yeah.
Right? Do you understand that? Like, it's a bad team. It's an offense. No one's with these they're going to be offenses with all these 41-point totals, and their ownership in DFS is going to be like 3%.
Yeah.
And if you think about that for the course of a full season, those are guys you have to start, or you have to be in consideration to start every week. And what are you doing? What are you doing? So yeah, I'm generally overweight, like a guy like Russell Gage. That team is going to be scoring a lot of points. And I don't much care about Chris Godwin or whatever. In that role, Antonio Brown was a top 10 receiver on a points per game basis last year. Yeah. And already the news is coming out that he's unguardable. Tom Brady requested him specifically be added to the roster to replace Antonio Brown. So no news about Julio Jones, the dusty Julio Jones. Is he going to be Titans Randy Moss? Is he going to be Colts Andre Johnson? Right? Who cares? Is he going to be Patriots Ocho Cinco?
Year one, round 6. My greatest player who's burned me.
Hey, but he could be T.O. in Cincinnati.
That's best case scenario, but T.O. was a different animal.
I agree.
T.O. was
also had to play
number
with
one
Cinco.
dog factor, number one dog rating. T.O. Right? That's a different animal altogether. This guy was generational work ethic and ability to raise his game.
He still thinks he believes he can play right now. Like,
exactly.
Every year.
Maybe he can.
Here's the thing.
Maybe he could.
Here's the thing with T.O. Same thing with Jerry Rice. Did those guys go to big schools, or did they go to like Central Tennessee, whatever, in Central Mississippi, whatever, Central Valley State, something, right? No, seriously, that's where T.O. went. That's where Jerry Rice went. There's something about that, guys. There's something about that where
like the adversity.
Christian Watson,
NDSU, baby. Let's go.
No, Christian Watson, unfortunately, is going to have a lost season because of the knee injury. It's a bummer, but that's if you're being real, that's what's going to happen. And then he's behind the 8 ball, and it sets the course of his whole trajectory of his whole career in the wrong direction. It's bad.
So you're saying we need to get the 5-year hype train on Christian Watson started now?
What I'm saying is this is counterintuitive. Had Terrell Owens been more explosive and gone to a big school, he wouldn't have been Terrell Owens.
Yeah.
Do you understand that? He would not have been Terrell Owens. Most of the best athletes would not have been what they were. They will admit that, hey, there's guys that have equal talent to me. They're better, but I want it in a way that I love this and they don't love it.
Colin Cowherd made that point with quarterbacks a while back, and you don't see a ton of elite quarterbacks at the NFL level coming from these top level collegiate programs. His point on that was you don't get the elite wide receivers, the elite offensive line that you might have at Alabama. If you're coming from the University of Miami, Ohio, as some of these other guys did. So you got to get sharper. You got to have your balls be a little bit.
Right?
Yeah, sure, of course.
You could be,
generally speaking,
you could be the golden boy quarterback at Alabama, like Mac Jones, but you also have this incredible drive to be the next Tom Brady, and it's just inherent. Those guys are really rare. That Mac Jones that comes from that background, and he's still that hungry like a small school guy.
Yeah.
hungry like a
dog.
A fourth round pick, hungry like a Kirk Cousins, hungry like a Dak Prescott. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy to see Mac Jones and what he's doing, given that he was essentially in sort of a golden boy chair. Same thing with Burrow, right? Burrow, these guys are, dog factor, dog rating through the roof with a guy like Burrow. And that, again, it makes analytics much more interesting, where it's not, you can't ever find the actual skeleton key to everything with analytics. There's always this other element that comes into play. And Julio Jones was never forced to learn how to run routes. He never needed to. And now when he's lost the explosiveness, now when he needs it, he's betrayed, right? He has to try to get more out of his body than his body's willing to give, and he tears and hurts himself every time. It's no surprise to me. It's the easiest thing to imagine that a guy like Julio Jones would try to tap into what he had, because that's the only way he knows how to beat defenders, and that it would betray him. That makes perfect sense to me. Like that was Andre Johnson. That was Demaryius Thomas. Rest in peace. So no. That's not getting me off Russell Gage. The fact of the matter is, that's where you're going to find value. You're going to find value in these teams that are going to score a lot of points. And there's certain exceptions, right? Treylon Burks is an exception where, okay, they're going to be run first, probably not going to score that, be top 10 in points scored. But if he's the true alpha, right, and he's that good, and he's a value in like the 7th, 8th round, then you can build your case. So I'm not saying I'm not a total snob, but you have to come strong, right? You have to, Your Honor, you have to argue your case for a player that's not in one of these top offenses, and you have to have a preponderance of evidence.
Yeah.
Like a multiple outs.
Burks is a preponderance of evidence type play.
Yeah.
And outside of that, I'm not getting a preponderance of evidence on Kyle Pitts in the 3rd round. I'm not getting a preponderance of evidence on Garrett Wilson. I'm not getting a preponderance of evidence on a lot of these guys on bad teams. That's why I don't draft many of them.
Well, we appreciate you being here, Matt Kelley. This has been such a treat to have the analyst with the #1 dog rating in him from fantasy football right here. But the link to Player Profiler, where you can get the fully loaded draft kit, the world famous draft kit, is in our description. So make sure you hit it there. It was an absolute pleasure to chop it up with you, Matt, here. So we appreciate your time and effort here, man.
The whispers here. We there. You asked for 1 sleeper. I think I gave you 7.
Yeah, look, we're not. Your knowledge is it's dripping. It's saturated in all these.
We're going to be
takes,
absorbing
so
this. We're going to be watching this one back and reliving this one. And I know us whispers here, we are very stoked to have you here. But King Whisperer himself, Richard Harris, as you mentioned, cheers for you on that one.
Dumbledore.
Yes.
Dumbledore and Marcus Aurelius. What a career for this guy.
You did. Amazing. Well, we appreciate you so much, Podfather. For Johnny Game Time Hicks, for Austin Sear, I'm Big Travie. We're the Fantasy Whispers. We're out. Peace.
Right here.
Hey, do you like mock drafts? We do too. You can come back every Monday and mock with us. Check out one of these videos and make sure you're liked and subscribed.